Hi, this is Chuck Hyde, Vistage Chair here in Northwest Arkansas, and I'm really pleased today to be joined by Stacey Mason. Now, Stacey is the first of our, I'll call it experts from Northwest Arkansas. We've been doing this series from literally for people all over the world, but one of the great blessings of living and working in Northwest Arkansas is the access to talent and expertise we have right here in Northwest Arkansas. So good morning, Stacey. Thanks for making time for us. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning.
Stacey and I, just some background for y'all that are watching. We've known each other a long time in various roles. I think, first back when you were still with Walmart and in the logistics area, our paths began to cross, work together at Soderquist. And now in your work, I've been following it with applied improvisation, not implied, but applied improvisation through her company, Improv Lab. Stacey, you and I share that we both started our careers in operational roles. And then kind of moved into this whole concept and field of leadership development. And that's something I've always appreciated about you, that you understand what it means to operate, right? And run a division, an organization, and deliver results. Stacey, we brought our Vistage groups out to you in December of this past year. And I don't know if I've told you this or not, but when I told our groups, like, here's what we're going to do, they went out, they were very complicit, and like went along with it. And then after, they said, okay, Chuck, we thought you were crazy, but that was awesome.
Oh, that's so nice.
So, but it was because they didn't understand what we were going to be doing, right? But when we got into it and the things we were able to learn that afternoon, actually all 3 afternoons we were with you, it was really, really special. So I appreciated you making time for us that day, how you invested into our members and what we learned, and really appreciate you making time today. We talked a little bit off camera, but just again, how are you and how have you been personally impacted by this crisis of COVID-19?
It's really been very interesting. I do executive coaching as well. And so that has been able to continue sort of uninterrupted because virtual technology, we can do lots of things online. Unfortunately, the Improv Lab has been at a standstill because all of the work that we do there is very group oriented, whether that's open enrollment or, intact teams coming. So it's been pretty much at a standstill, waiting for what the next iteration of change looks like. But in this downtime, what's been really interesting to me, I met a lady years ago, and we were late to an event, and I'm profusely apologizing. Oh my gosh, we've wasted your time. I'm so sorry we're late. And she looked at me, and she was as serious as can be, and she says, "Never apologize for found time." Okay. And so her perspective was, yes, we were late, but she had this extra time that she hadn't anticipated, and she used it basically to read or to meditate or walk in the woods or whatever she did. And so I've kind of picked up on her attitude right now during this found time. I've really capitalized on self-care, and it has been incredibly joyful to be able to do that.
That's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that perspective. What a graceful response, right, she had for you there. And I think I'm hearing other anecdotes of that we're finding ways to be more graceful than maybe we would have otherwise because of the context we find ourselves in. So yeah, for you to be able to do that is huge. And I think I also appreciate, yes, you've developed an expertise. You're a coach. You're doing, but you're also a business owner, right? I mean, you're just like everybody else out there, right? And you've got something you're trying to make successful and contribute to people. And there's a real dimension of what it means to own and run a business right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's a little scary, actually.
Sure.
You don't know what's going to come next, and then you feel an incredible obligation and a responsibility when you do open to ensure that you do it correctly.
Yeah, right.
Follow the protocols that either are preset or that you've determined are necessary. So there is a little bit of a weight on your shoulders to what is next. But I'm I'm excited. I need to get back in there, and we need to laugh and play and experiment and do whatever it is that we do. But we got to get back
Yeah.
to playing around a little bit.
Well, I'm with you. Well, I wish you the best as that comes, because you're right. There's a huge responsibility in what you do to the how you serve, your clients along the way. Stacey, I want to start and I want to kind of get into a broad view for anybody who may be watching this or wasn't with us when we were in your care that day in December. To start with, it's just the concept of applied improvisation. The first lines on your website are these: if all the world's a stage, then your life is definitely an improv class. You better get good at it. So I love that idea. Comment on that and how you might compare, contrast what that looks like, what we considered normal 60 plus days ago, and where we find ourselves now, and the implications that have come with it.
I think largely when people go to work each day, there are massive amounts of interruptions that sort of hit you. And so I think to a large degree, what we do is unscripted or unplanned or unrehearsed, just in the normal course of doing business. And, everyone's watching us in those moments of unplannedness and how we handle them. And improv is largely about working without a script, just sort of making it up as you go along. And I think that is, again, what a lot of people do each day, because, and I say this often, disruption is the new business as usual.
Right.
That's really what's happening. And so how fast can you think on your feet, and how well do you handle things that you hadn't anticipated? And so, 60 days ago, we would have been talking about it in those terms. How fast do you move? How well do you work off the top of your intelligence if disruption really is the new business as usual? I think what's going to be different about when we go back is the speed at which you do that. I think there's one thing for disruption to be a constant in our lives, but I think it's another thing the speed at which the disruption will continue to come now. So I think that's going to be the biggest difference that I'm noticing. And it will be interesting. When we talk about improv, there's lots of forms to it. Just because it's made up as you go doesn't necessarily mean it has to be fast. There's lots of improv that's called long form, and it's pretty slow.
Okay.
But this is going to be improv on steroids, I think.
Okay. Well, you said something, Stacey. You talked about think on your feet, and the idea that clicked for me was a posture, right? A posture of being able. If we're in a posture of relaxing or thinking things are a certain way, I think that probably won't serve us well as a posture of being ready, right? So, and we had a speaker that we did in one of these interviews a few weeks ago with Ian McDougall, who studies organizational dynamics and life cycles and things like that. And he talked about uncertainty being the terrain of the entrepreneur. And so this idea of terrain, like if we know the terrain that we're going to be in, as you're predicting here, what does that say about the posture of improvisation as leaders?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think it's going to be largely about mindset. Okay. I really think it's going to be about your mindset. But when you say posture, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind, and I have brothers that play tennis, anytime you're on the court, you're sort of in this bouncing, anticipatory, where's the ball going to go? What is the strategy of my shot? And I think that's going to be this sort of energy, if you will. It's going to be, I need to be anticipatory differently than I have been before.
Got it.
And that's the best sort of analogy that jumped out at me.
Okay. I saw a LinkedIn post recently where you referred to a tool that you had used with us back in December when our Vistage groups were there. And it was called Fortunately, Unfortunately. And I think it's a great idea, but it seems very like a high potential tool for the times that we find ourselves in. You just mentioned mindset. So unpack that concept a bit for us and some of the implications it might have for us in the workplace, specifically right now.
Yeah. Fortunately, unfortunately is one of my favorite exercises. And actually, I use it in my work, but I use it all the time. I'll do it at the house. I'll do it in the car. It's just a really great sort of check-in with yourself. But fortunately, unfortunately is a game where you take two different stances, and typically you play it with a partner. So I may say something like, fortunately, I won the lottery. And my partner may say, well, unfortunately, it was only $1,000. And I'll say, well, unfortunately, that was enough to throw myself a birthday party. And my partner will say, well, unfortunately, no one came. And I'll say, well, fortunately, then I got to eat all the cake myself. And then my partner's going to say, well, unfortunately, you got sick. Right. And so there's this banter back and forth between what went well and what didn't go well. How did you win? How did you not win? And I think that it's the duality of that critical thinking, because the fortunately stance is, it's the positive, optimistic, glass half full sort of posture.
Right.
And the unfortunately is the sort of negative stance, the pessimistic, the glass half empty. And you're sort of volleying that back and forth all the time. Now, I'll tell you in full disclosure, and I tell my people this all the time, I'm glass half empty. In fact, I will tell people I don't have a glass. That's how negative I go or how dark I go. But that's my particular wiring, because I'm wired to go correction of errors, devil's advocate, how do we fix what's broken?
What could go wrong here, maybe?
Exactly. I'm always in that mindset, which is helpful in the right time at the right place. But if I overplay that mindset, then I'm missing what lives on the other path of, fortunately, what went well, what can we capitalize on, what's not wrong. And so what I love about that exercise when I do it with people is, and I let them switch back and forth. I want you to be fortunately first, right, and then I want you to try unfortunately, because I want you to know what it feels like. People have a preference for one or the other. Okay. That's where I go first, which is great. You have to be able to realize, are you in a stance that's not effective given the situation that you're currently in? Because really you need to be able to do both. And you need to know when you're doing which one and when can the other one be more productive.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it would be easy just to say, right, that, well, fortunately must be the better one because it's positive, but there's you hit it on the head there. There's value in both, and circumstantially or situationally understanding what's called for, what maybe you're predisposed to, and how that one might work better than the other.
Yeah. And again, in self-disclosure, I go negative so fast, so often that it can be a hindrance to me. Okay. It's funny on stage. It's funny when I'm performing, because I'll typically go dark and I'll go angry. It's sort of my thing. But that's not funny, and that's not helpful in the business world. And that paints me in a pretty bad way.
Right. Right. So you got to have the range and the span to go both ways as a leader, particularly. Right?
And I love that. And that's exactly what we should be talking about, is range. How much range do you have in any of the skill sets that you possess?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Stacey, you've spent a career leading. You've spent training leaders and now coaching leaders in your work in applied improv. What are one or two key insights that you've picked up on that you'd say are particularly important for business owners and executives? You mentioned being mindful earlier, or just what we should be exercising right now.
I think mindset is paramount, and I always am going to talk about that. One of the other foundational pieces that I talk about the most is called reframing, or okay, transference of learning. And so anytime that you have an experience, I think it's helpful to be able to take that experience and unpack it and go, I learned this here, so where else can it apply? And so if you think about what you learned when you went to an applied improvisation session around storytelling or collaboration or problem solving, you have to be able to deconstruct that learning and reconstruct it back in other places. So in this example, it would be back at work.
Okay.
If you take what's currently happening now with the way the world is impacted through this health situation, what are we learning at a macro level that we're all going to take back and apply at a granular level? And so I think one of the biggest benefits of applied improvisation that can help people right now is that concept of reframing. I've got to be able to take something that happened in one context and apply it to potentially an unrelated context.
Okay.
And pull out the learning.
Yeah. Well, particularly you mentioned disruption earlier. Now, when so much is different, and I think the narrative is more and more that in this idea that we're going to get back to normal, conventional wisdom is now saying that we're not going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
So it's going to demand reframing, right? When things are just different than they were before. It's good. Yeah. If we're trying to go back and use old tools and old context when the context is completely different, I mean, we're going to be limited, I think.
I would agree. To a large degree, I think we've learned a lot about humanity during this particular time in our lives. And I really hope we don't go back to normal. I hope we don't say we all want to go back to this a new normal. I would love it if we said we went back to a new reality.
Yeah, you're right. Spot on.
Well, so I'm always talking about mindset, and I'm always talking about reframing, because I want people to take what they've learned one place and keep applying it somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, Stacey, if anybody wanted to follow up with more from you in terms of, information or resources, what's the best place for them to connect with you? I know you've got several out there.
Yeah, you certainly start with the website, theimprovlab.com, and you can sort of understand the work that I'm doing. There's a video there that unpacks a little bit about it from various client perspectives.
Okay.
The other side of my umbrella would be masononleadership.com. That's sort of the executive coaching and the behavioral assessment work that I do. But if anybody wanted to reach me, the best way to do it is send me an email, masononleadership@gmail.com, or certainly to just call me. LinkedIn, everything that you need to know about me is on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Stacey, it's been a few minutes. It's not been too long since I've seen you, but it's good to see your face now for the first time in a few months when all this craziness has hit us. Wish you and Monty the best as you guys continue to work and pursue the things you're pursuing. And if there's everything I can do for you, please let me know. But thanks for the time and the investment you've made in our members and leaders today.
Well, thanks, Chuck. It's been great to partner with you.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
See ya.